Well, good morning, Miramar, and welcome to the show. My name is Tamara G. I'm your host. Don't forget, you can check us out on all of our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at City of Miramar. And we all know it's right here in Miramar. And right here with us, we actually have, she's from Florida. We have Sara McElroy, and Sara is the founder of Raze to Rise. It's a movement uncovering the lessons women learned from the Great Resignation. Apparently, a lot of us are doing some conscious quitting. So, Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tamara. It's so great to be here.
Oh my gosh, Sara, tell us a little bit about your background and why and how this got started.
Sure. Well, I am a conscious quitter and a two-time member of the Great Resignation, class of 2021 and 2022. Yes, a little bit unexpected, but gosh, it has just been such an honor getting to speak with all of these women and hearing their stories. So it started out for me, I burned out really hard in a chief marketing officer role in Atlanta back in early 2021, and it really culminated with a bout of shingles. That was my wake up call moment, especially when the doctor told me that I was going to have 10 days off from work to be able to recover from shingles. I remember feeling so overjoyed, which is not a normal response at all. But I'd been working during that time leading up to that point, working up to 20 hours a day between both a job and an executive MBA program. And I was just burnt, as so many people were on the
Yeah,
other
you were
end of
like,
the
thank you.
pandemic.
I can sleep for the next 10 days.
Yes, exactly. It was just like such a sense of relief. And, I look back on that version of me and I have so much compassion for her because it's like she was just doing what she thought was right, like building that perfect on paper life or perfect on resume life. But I'm really proud in that after feeling that sense of relief and walking out from the doctor's office, it was like, okay, Sara, this isn't sustainable. We're going to have to make a change. So I hit the life reset button, and that included a move to come down here to Boca. I found a new job and, really dedicated to a fresh start holistically. So I'm cutting back on hours. I'm doing more self care and meditating and yoga and all of the things. And I've really put in better boundaries around my work, but came down here and was working for an organization that had a very misogynistic culture and was dealing with some sexual harassment issues that weren't properly addressed for months. And so when ultimately they did do an investigation, even months after HR overheard one of the comments, and it was very clearly a just a performative check the box kind of exercise to just get me to stop pushing for it. I was done. And the next day I walked away, even without giving 2 weeks notice. I was just so fed up. I had this nascently healing burnout wound, and walking into that organization every day and not knowing what was going to happen. Was my voice really being heard as I'm asking for accountability and there to be some sort of resolution? And it was just like a paper cut on that nascently healing burnout wound. So that is how I ended up doing what I'm doing now, which is talking to other women and hearing their stories, because I thought I cannot be the only woman in the midst of millions of women leaving in the great resignation. I can't be the only woman getting mired in these spin cycles of burnout and discontentment and all of those things. So that's how I started Race to Rise.
And I was gonna say, now, Sara, I just met you a few minutes ago. You don't look like the type that would just leave a job and
I
not give
am not.
notice. But
I
it
am
has gotten
not.
to that point though, right?
Yes, exactly. And, that's actually why I'm really passionate about conscious quitting, because I don't want other women to have to get to that point. Because doing that sort of thing of just, submitting a resignation letter and walking out the door with little plan of what that's going to look like, and even leaving on terms that are not so graceful, like that doesn't feel good. That is like fully shaking your snow globe and giving no thought to where all the snow is going to land. And it's not the way to really do it. But I have so much compassion for other women who are getting to that boiling point. And the idea with conscious quitting is to recognize the signs of grumbling when we know that we need to walk away, and honoring that part of us that does ultimately come to this place of knowing, and planning an exit strategy that is really graceful so we aren't completely overwhelming our nervous systems and destabilizing our entire lives by quitting like that. But thank you for calling that out, because I was that good girl. It was like I was given the corporate playbook of what the good girl does, and I checked all the boxes. I did all the things. I never rocked the boat. I really just kept my head down and worked hard, and I did anything anybody was asked of me. And 2020 version of Sarah would be shocked that 2022 version did this. But a lot of people have hit that boiling point as of late.
Well, trust me, I did it early. I was the class of 2017. Um,
Okay.
yes, I
Yes.
left a job that people thought, what in the world? Back on radio, national platform on 44
Wow.
stations across the country. And I couldn't deal with the work environment anymore. And
Yeah.
and people, still to this day ask, oh, wow, you walked away. I gave my 2 weeks. Actually, I did a month. I gave a month's notice because it was radio, and I gave a month's notice. But yeah, I couldn't deal with it anymore. And what you said, Sarah, made perfect sense. You were waking up. I was waking up feeling
Yes.
sick, not wanting to go. And there was
Mhm.
nothing wrong with me, but it was all definitely mental, and was starting to manifest itself physically and mentally. And, that's why so many women leaders really are quitting corporate America at the highest rate ever. But what do you tell someone when they have a mortgage, when they have kids,
Yes.
when they are working up that corporate ladder, that C-suite ladder? Is it right for them to quit, or do they try to find a way around it? Because I'm also an Aries, Sarah, and my thing is I'm going to find a way to work around you.
I hear you. I hear you there. Well, for me, there's a bit of a misconception around the great resignation, in that you hear the refrains of people saying, nobody wants to work these days. People are just leaving and they're not working, they're not doing anything. And what I found is, from both my research and speaking with women, and in the study that you're speaking of, the Women in the Workplace report, which McKinsey and Lean In put out just a few weeks ago, finding that women are, especially those in leadership roles, they're walking out at the highest rate they've ever recorded since the report's inception in 2015, at a rate of 10.5%, which, put at scale, the report says that means for every woman being promoted into director level ranks or above, there are two who are walking out the door. It's one of those things where they're saying, like, this is not women don't want to work. Like, let's be clear, this is the great breakup. Women are breaking up with untenable workplaces. And that's what I found in my research as well. This is so much more about women finding new organizations that better align with their values, with the lifestyle, the work style they want, the type of work. We're talking purposeful work too. But we also know that women are walking out from some of these other cultures because they've been passed over for promotions, experiencing microaggressions, discrimination, harassment, having to do office housework, like order the lunches and note taking. Just like, women have kind of had it up to here, but what they're doing is they're moving to different organizations. And so that's where I think, when we have those very real constraints in our lives and we need to work, say, like, gravity is real and so is paying our bills. We want to figure out a way to leave gracefully from an organization and take conscious steps forward in our careers, so that we are ending up in a place that is better for us, as much as we can control, right, and plan for, without actually being on the other side and in that organization.
If you are just tuning in to Good Morning Miramar, welcome to the show. I'm speaking today with Sara. She is Sara McElroy. She is the founder of Raze to Rise, a movement uncovering the lessons women learned from the Great Resignation. And you mentioned some of the reasons why people are leaving jobs too. I think another one that maybe folks don't really want to talk about is the lack of help on jobs. You've got one person doing the job of three people. I'm tired. I can't do that. And as you mentioned, Sarah, you were working 20 hours a day. Who does that to somebody? Like, why did your company feel that was okay?
Well, so to be fair to the company, I was doing my executive MBA program too. So part of that work was those hours were dedicated to that. But I will say that there was little empathy for balancing the demands of both. And it was at times it was really shocking. Like when I was taking calls, like taking a call from my boss on Thanksgiving, or my boss called when finally, so preceding the shingles, I had a couple of episodes of throwing up blood that landed me in the ER. And after the first episode, I went to go see the doctor. He wanted to do an endoscopy to see what was going on, and I put it off. I'm like, I at least have to get through graduation. It's just like, it's too much to try to do this right now. But then I did graduate. I had another episode that happened the following January. And so at that point, it's like, okay, I'm going to get the endoscopy now. I schedule it and I do it in the afternoon on a Thursday because God forbid I'm not going to take up a whole day to do it. But I leave the office and I go to my procedure, and my boss calls me when he knows I'm going to this procedure and I'm being wheeled back to be put under anesthesia. And even more fascinating is that he was a doctor. He's a doctor himself. And it's just like, this is just wild. How is there such lack of empathy and like compassion? And I look back on that girl and I just honestly, if I'm completely truthful, I couldn't give myself the permission to rest. And I wanted someone to look at me and say, Sarah, it's enough. It's good enough. You can rest now. You can take a break. And it just, a lot of us during the pandemic, as we saw other people losing their jobs, grateful to have one. I'm going to keep working really hard. It's like we felt like we became really, really wound very tightly and couldn't give ourselves that release. And as organizations are like, they're just putting out more, so we're not going to throttle back at all. It became a real recipe for disaster for a lot of people.
Right. And truly we heard about the great resignation and people moving away. And because you could work remotely now, you could have a job that was based in New York
Yes.
City, but you're living in Utah or wherever. So the pandemic helped a lot of people and also hurt a lot of people.
Yes.
But ultimately,
Yes.
I think it helped a lot of people to realize what they wanted to do, which is what you were talking about. So when people decide, tell us a little bit more about the conscious quitting, because is that where people, they just literally do their job. I come here from 8 to 5.
Mm.
That's what y'all paid me to do. That is what I'm gonna do. Don't call me while I'm being wheeled into the
Right.
room to get an
Exactly.
endoscopy. So is that part of it, that people just kind of lose their interest for their job and then kind of detach from it?
That's a great question. That is actually quiet quitting, which was a viral TikTok trend. So it's more of, I'll say quiet quitting has kind of a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, some people are saying, I've quiet quit my job. When you look at it, it was kind of one of those buzzy terms that picked up a lot of steam and went from TikTok as more videos were posted, and it was picked up by all kinds of national news outlets. And as they interviewed people to ask them what quiet quitting means to them, on one end of the spectrum, this is people who are just putting into place like the right boundaries that they probably always should have had with work, which that would have been probably me if I had scaled back from working, excessive hours to like normal hours, or saying, I'm not going to answer that. Well, I didn't answer the call, but I responded via text to be like, is everything okay? But like that would have been me not responding to that text as I'm being wheeled back. I would have let it go. But so on one side of the spectrum, it's better boundaries and decoupling one's identity with work. And then on the far side of the spectrum, that is really more of that, like, I'm fully disengaging from this work. I'm going to do the bare minimum. I'm just going to go and get what I need to get done. And that is all that they're going to get out of me. But it's been a funny thing because people have heard about quiet quitting and have been like, Gen Zers, this is not really a new thing. Like you think about the movie Office Space and the character Ron Livingston, like he was definitely, well, or one could say that he was one of the first cultural references we had to like an idea of quiet quitting, although he was kind of like loud and audacious about the fact that he wasn't really working. But it's an interesting thing where conscious quitting, I believe, is the antithesis of quiet quitting and like the antidote, because there is, if you're on this side of the spectrum and you're just putting good boundaries into play, like good for you, you do that, because it is, if we don't learn that or do that sooner, we will learn that lesson the hard way, because our bodies will tell us when we have gone too far. If you're on this side of the spectrum, to me, continuing to walk into organizations that are taking more than they're giving, we're not happy there, we're disengaged, that is a waste of our precious time and energy when we already know we should go, and just staying doesn't really bring us as much fulfillment as moving on possibly could. It becomes a question of opportunity cost at that point. And it's like, we got the one life, and that's what people really woke up to during the pandemic. So why would I want to keep going into an organization where I'm quiet quitting every single day if there are other options available to me? Now, to your point of mortgage and insurance and things like that, for some people it can feel like, I can't even look for another corporate job because the salary and the benefits here and health things are such that I can't even leave this insurance behind, or whatever it might be. And that's more than okay. If you need to do what you need to do to stay somewhere, even though it's not the right fit, but it's, the right thing for your family and your life, I 1,000% respect that. But for those of us who can consider another corporate job or doing something different, like, it's one of those things. Why wouldn't you at least want to try and move in the direction of a more fulfilling, intentional, and sustainable future, knowing that we got one shot at this and we spend a third of our, hours 5 days a week at a minimum at work. We don't want to check out of our lives. So why would we just check out at work?
And the other part of that too, I think also, is that the older you get, more things are more important to you, some things more than others,
Sure.
location, how far you are from work,
Yeah.
what the benefits are. Do you get more time off, or do you make more money? Things like that definitely play a part in whether you stay at
Yes.
a place or not. But if you are thinking about conscious quitting, how do you create that action plan? I know there are some points for the 6-stage process of walking away.
Yes.
Let's start with the
Yes.
rumbling.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So, from my conversations with dozens of women, I've interviewed women not only from the Great Resignation, I interviewed women who have also felt like they've been stuck in jobs and like they couldn't leave. And then also women who made big leaps prior and have more benefit as far as the space between when they made their leap and looking back with hindsight. And what I came to find is that this roadmap emerged as I charted everyone's journey and my own journey, and rumbling is the first stage in the walking away process. And this is where we're starting to feel that misalignment, that fragmentation. We're starting to see the cracks and fissures in our work situation. It's like we're on the other side of the honeymoon stage, those rose colored glasses, they're coming off. And we're starting to feel like perhaps we've settled, a little trapped. We can feel disillusioned and disengaged, and they can absolutely manifest physically: burnout, insomnia, lack of social energy. Even for me, it was the shingles and the throwing up blood. So that is definitely the first step. And then the second is that knowing. And that is when we come to the realization that we're not going to be able to fix what is making us unhappy in the rumbling stage, and we're going to have to walk away. Now, as a caveat here, what I will say is that just because we're feeling some sort of discomfort, tension, friction, challenge at work, it doesn't mean we just need to walk away automatically, right? Like, it can be that we're having those experiences because it's our body's way of telling us something isn't right here and there is a conflict to be addressed. Or maybe it's, I need to have a conversation about flexibility. It can be that on balance, if you look across the board, you really overall like your job and your work, and that's amazing. And it could just be like, that is the push. That's the part of you that's saying, I need to set a different boundary, or I need to ask for something that would work for me. And then at least when you go through that process, you have that conversation or discussion, address the conflict or whatever it might be. You may not get an outcome that you like, but at least you know you've tried. And so that's an important distinction there. But what I will say is that in interviewing all of these women, I was so blown away that they all just came to this place of knowing that they had to leave their jobs. And I was really, that like that good girl part of me was really stunned, because it was like, how audacious of us to be making big career decisions without a lot of like logic or pragmatism.
But it
And
is
some women
logic.
did.
But I
Well,
think it
it,
is
yes.
logic because you
Yeah.
realize what's happening. And as you mentioned,
Yes.
a lot of times you can't change the culture. If you're working in
Yes.
an environment where people are misogynistic and they're sexist and they're racist and they're this and that, all the is's,
Yes. Yes.
this isn't the place for me. So you can't change it. I would love to know, Sarah, because the third part is the decision. So once the
Yes.
rumblings happen, whether your body is telling you you're having the stress or whatever's going on, then the knowing what's happening, the decision. What is that all about?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Decision is the kind of the meatiest part of the journey, where not only are we making that mental commitment to walk away, but we are mapping out that exit strategy. So that is figuring out when we're going to submit our resignation letter, how much time we're going to give, who we're going to talk to, transition planning, all of those things. But the fun part of it, like the really juicy part, is where we're figuring out what our next move is going to be. And we start with ourselves and our values, our desired work style, desired lifestyle. Like, start from a place of what the dream might look like. Now, I know that can sound to some people, it's like, ugh, you just want to dismiss that outright because it's like it's work. How would it ever be the dream for all but a privileged few? But what I will say is that when we suspend limitations and really let ourselves get into feeling what we would want to feel with our work and our career, that's where we want to start. Because if we can't even figure out what that would look like, how would we ever even move somewhat in the direction of that, even if we can't achieve it fully? So that's where we figure out what that's going to be as well, so that we're taking steps that are conscious, moving in the direction of a career that is going to be more fulfilling for us, rather than, oh, this company's going to throw, thousands more dollars at me. And so I'm going to do that. Or that's a fancy title. That looks great. I'll figure it out. I certainly have done that kind of thing before too. But that doesn't land us in places of greater fulfillment. Great resignationers, depending on the survey, have said that between 20 and 70% of them have said they regret their decision. And I don't think it's necessarily that it was the quitting itself. If it was coming from a place of more conscious architecture, I think there would be less buyer's remorse on the other side. Because if we're just making knee jerk reactions, we're just chasing more money, we're not really asking ourselves the right questions and getting to know ourselves, then sure, it is going to be that we're more likely to be disappointed on the other side.
So, okay, so the rumbling started, the knowing, the decision, and now here comes the action. What are we going to do?
Yes. Yes, action is that taking those physical steps to submit your resignation letter and to sever your relationship with your employer. So that has to be a separate milestone. We don't think about that. We can often think that it's just a foregone conclusion if we know we're supposed to leave, but it's hurdles to get through those. Essentially, it's like crossing chasms, and those can be very tough chasms to cross, because just because we decide we're going to leave doesn't mean we'll have enough momentum, or we might have fear or other roadblocks come up. So it's important to realize it is a decision that we are getting ready for in that decision stage, to then be able to take that proper action on the other side.
And what about the after effects? That's the next step.
Yes, after effects. This is where we want to remember, even if we're doing all of the things right, like we're coming back to a place of dreaming, we're thinking about our own values and culture and lifestyle, work style, all those things. Even if we do all of those right, we can still not enjoy where we end up. And that is more than okay, because just because we feel like we're falling or we're failing doesn't mean that we are. this is just as much a journey as the rest of our lives are. There are peaks and valleys and lessons that come out of ending up somewhere we don't want to be, because that's what we have to remember with After Effects. As much as we try to perfectly plan our next move and execute it, things are not always within our control. And we forget about that sometimes. So we'll get in that next job. And instead of looking for the lesson and opportunity and figuring out, okay, what does this mean for what I'm not liking here? What does this mean for my move after that? We can just get really mired in that disappointment and get stuck and really enveloped in that. And that's not helpful for us. We've got to remember that good, bad, or ugly, whatever the consequences may be, we will find that in the final step, which is assimilation, as we look up from the rubble and the dust has settled, we see we're more resilient, we've grown stronger, we know ourselves better, we're more adaptable to change, we can flex that risk-taking muscle more in the future, and we're moving in the direction of greater fulfillment, even if we don't love that place where we landed. And so honestly, Tamara, I think I'm a perfect example of that, in that I could tell you, this move down to Florida for me, to Boca, was, gosh, it was just terrible. The organization I ended up in was just such a toxic culture, and it was such a bad fit. But I don't say that because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now if that hadn't happened. And as much as I struggled with my well being and mental health deteriorating during that time, I wouldn't change it for a second. I also really, really love Boca. I mean, coming from Atlanta to living close to the beach, like, it is such a dream. And I'm so grateful for that. And so my after effects have been mixed, but that's okay. In my assimilation, I can see this was such, it was honestly the perfect move for me.
And again, that goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Yes, you could still be in Atlanta, where I believe, you guys have at least 3 of the 4 seasons. You have snow. You won't be seeing any of that in Boca.
That is
You
indeed, yes.
exactly. You'll be able to go to the beach. So again, what is more important to you? People they have to know what that is for themselves.
Yes.
But sometimes you will take a position or do something new or something else because there's something else that's important to you that comes with that. So
Yes.
you just have to be that person. And if you are thinking about conscious quitting, then of course, Sara just gave you the 6 steps to it: the rumbling, the knowing, the decision, action, after effects, and then the assimilation. How can people get more information on Raze to Rise, Sara? It's been so good talking with you. How can they get information?
Yes. You as well. So it's Raze to Rise, as in RAZE to rise.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn and Instagram as Sarah J. McElroy. I am happy to connect personally. I love hearing more stories or just chatting about these things, because I think we are truly on the precipice, well, in the midst of, I guess I should say, in the midst of workforce upheaval, and us all getting together to change the landscape of the way we work. So any way I can support with that, I'm happy to do so.
Well, thank you so very much. Conscious quitting expert, Sara McElroy. She is the founder of Raze to Rise. That's RAZE, raise2rise.com. Go there, connect with her, tell her your story. I am sure that everybody's story is different. So she would love to hear your story as well. And thank you for telling us your story today, Sara, and how people can really move forward from knowing what is toxic, what is not for them. I was, as you were talking about all of these different steps, I was thinking this could work for personal relationships too, but we'll
Oh,
go there a whole
yes.
nother time.
Indeed.
Thank you so very much, Sara. We appreciate you talking with us today. And thank you for being on Good Morning Miramar.
Thank you, Tamara. So great to be here.
And thank you for watching Good Morning Miramar. Don't forget, check us out on all of our social media: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at City of Miramar. Until next time, I'm Tamara G. See ya.